Well, welcome everyone. Uh, on the 31st of March, we've got a kind of an interesting uh, piece of information about the registry and genetic testing that John's put together. And so most of the meeting will probably cover that. We also want to encourage you to make any suggestions for any future subjects you'd like us to go over. And of course, we'll have a question and answer session on anything that has come up or any questions you may have. So right now, let's open it up to John and let him explain um, everything or all the advances that he's made with his programs to be able to uh, on the registry and the genetic testing progress. Can you do that, John?
Yep. Is
Okay.
it is it sharing just the PDF? I can't quite tell what it's sharing. No, it's sharing everything, isn't it? Try that one more time. I want a window. I want that window.
There you go.
PDF now?
Yep. No, it's the registry updates and genomic progress,
Okay. Okay.
your cover sheet.
You can see okay, the screen size is all right.
Yeah, looks good.
Looks
Okay.
good.
Yep.
So we'll start with registry features and then we'll go on to the genetics next. This is kind of table of contents of all the new things in the registry. So we've got the ability to do christened and vanity names now. You can issue leases and bred ewes for transferring them. You can now put photos in the registry. We calculate in coefficient of inbreeding, and you can do test matings to see if, basically look at the pedigrees or if the coefficient of inbreeding is going to go too high. There's some minor certificate updates. I'll get into that in a little later. The URL has changed. It was pedigree.dev/AAWSBA, and now it's aawsba.pedigree.dev. I believe I sent out an email on that one. We set up a new demo site, so any future associations that want to come try our software out, they're able to evaluate it, and play with it themselves. And then some other things that don't necessarily apply to you guys is we now have a sanctioned show system. So for people that do, titles and champion legs and all that kind of stuff that exists, and for associations that do mailed certificates, there's something for them too now. On the vanity names, what you would do is you'll go to the animal that you're interested in on their page. In the top right, there will be an actions button. You'll click name this animal. A little modal will pop up and you'll put in the vanity name. You'll add that to cart and then process just like normal. It has to be approved first. That way, if, making sure people don't necessarily copy someone else's name with putting a 1 instead of an I. But also, yeah, so basically it goes to an approval process. Once that's approved, it'll show up here kind of in italic quotes. So this would be Excalibur or something like that over at the top of the animals page. And the same thing on the certificates. So names have to be unique. And then the price was set at $20. Leases. So on your user dashboard, you'll click leases and breeding. And then in that little tab, you'll click the actions button and create a lease. From there, you'll put in the animal that you're going to issue a lease on, who you're issuing it to, when it starts, and then you don't have to put an end date, but you can. The important thing is that it's unlimited usage rights for that animal in that time window. Rams would be the conception, ewes would be the birth. The association is not involved in leases at all. That's just between producers. So there's no fees, but both animals do need to be registered. Or sorry, the leased animal needs to be registered. And the lessee needs an account. For bred ewes, this is intended when you're selling bred ewes. So you can click record exposure. It's the other option on that little menu. You pick your exposure start and end. Who was the sire? What was the method? And if you had any notes you wanted to add about it. And then that sire can then be used with the breeding rights are granted to that person, like say you're transferring it to someone, they can now use that sire of the bred ewe. The mating simulator, you go to the animals page. So the little 3 bars, this 3 bars in the top right, you'd open it and go to the animals page. From there, there's the breeding simulator. You'll click on it, pick your sire, pick your dam, and then it'll calculate the coefficient of inbreeding for those animals and then show you what their proposed pedigree tree would look like. So not a big feature, but maybe useful. Photo support. You can see photos on the animal detail page. It does support multiple. For AAWSBA, it's set up for 2 photos. There'll be a little manage photos button on the animals page. So you can click that, you'll upload a photo. A little modal will come up showing the space that it's going to clip the photo to. And so you can drag with your left mouse to position the photo correctly. And you can use your mouse wheel to scroll in and out to zoom in or zoom out on the photo. When you're in the manage mode, there's a little star. You can click, this is the primary photo. That's the one that'll show first. The system can be configured to do uploads of photos at registration time. It's not for AAWSBA right now, right? You just manually update them as you go. Some of our near-term plans is we've got 2 prospective clients that we're setting up for onboarding. So, a lot of time's being taken up there. But that's good news because that keeps the registry service healthy. Looking at limited registration, so that's like a $2 registration. Those animals would get a no offspring restriction, but then it could be upgraded to a full registration by any time whoever owns the animal, right? So it's not like a dog limited registration where you're withholding breeding rights. You can upgrade. We're looking at setting up a hidden disease tracking system, and so say there's jaw defects or cryptorchids, things like that. This would enable a free registration of a diseased animal. And it's hidden. So only the producer and the association can see them. This would allow us to track either via pedigree or genomics, if there's any relation between animals that are exhibiting problems. The genetic inventory it's still in our queue. That would allow you to upload semen or embryos. Basically, you can have them pre-pedigreed. You can transfer them to other users at no cost. And then just the life cycle management on the embryos. An open discussion for some of these onboarding groups. We've made some improvements on the certificates, so we might come back and do an improvement on the AAWSBA certificate. I don't know how important that is for folks. I don't know how high to prioritize that one, but we can certainly make another pass at it. And then a little further out, we're looking at a sales marketplace or putting up ads. So you can basically put your animals up for sale directly on the registry. And so they would have more photos that are capable of being attached to them. You put in price, description, all that kind of thing. One thing that we will add in the short term is you can put on your profile page for the registry, you could put a link to a website or Facebook, if you want to get someone directly to your own sites. Any questions on the registry topics before we go to genetics?
John, you said the vanity name, that's $20. Is that with AAWSBA?
Yes.
Like add a vanity name, they are going to charge an extra 20? Is that I'm understanding
Yeah,
that?
so you would register the animal first, and then you'll essentially request a vanity name afterwards.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, going on to genetics. Here's kind of the things I was going to talk about. We'll probably just jump right in. So the major US labs that will do genetic testing, like the wet labs, are Neogen Zoetis. They use Illumina panels, so their technology. Neogen has a custom 50,000 SNP panel, but it is proprietary, so they don't make public a lot of the markers out of it. There's Eurofins. They use Thermo Fisher as their actual technology. They use a standard 50,000 panel, so all the data is available from them. Flock 54 uses the Eurofins Thermo Fisher technology on their custom 1000 panel. And then there's also Weatherbees, who does not have large US footprint, but they're looking to increase it. And the thing that's interesting with Weatherbees is they're very ovine focused. It's been relatively difficult making progress with the labs, being a small company. But I've got a retired geneticist that's been has a lot of connections to them, and so he's been able to bypass the front door on a lot of these, and so we've been establishing those relationships. One of the things I wanted to highlight, part of why is it taking so long to set up genetics is none of these panels are cross compatible, and so whatever vendor you go with is pretty much the one you're stuck with, unless you wanted to retest all of your existing animals, right? And that could be very expensive. So we want to make sure that we're selecting a long-term partnership that's going to be stable and keep offering that panel for the foreseeable future.
John,
Yeah.
I have a question on Weatherbees. I just thought of it. Where are they located? Would those be shipped overseas, or do they have an office in the US?
I don't have an answer for that yet. I'm assuming that at a minimum, the genetic extraction would be done in the US. There's all kinds of nasty permits if you were to ship the raw TSU overseas. But my understanding is that Weatherbees is looking to build like a full US footprint. Like I say, I haven't actually met with them. We've kind of gone through the introductory emails. The geneticist that's helping me has been kind of making all those contacts. Like I say, this one's TBC. I don't know if it'll pan out or not in the long term.
Okay. I just
Like
thought of that though.
with one of the other labs, they don't do the panels, but they do some specialty testing. They do all the actual testing is done in Germany. One of the other labs I've been talking to. And so they would do DNA extract in the US and then ship the purified DNA to Germany to do all the work. And then, obviously results just come back digitally. On that topic, Neogen is, or really Zoetis is very cattle focused. So there's a little concern there. We don't know what their long-term plans are, with the acquisition of Neogen. Eurofins is, they serve everyone in their big footprint. So I don't think, there's a lot of risk there. The Weatherbees is very ovine focused. So these guys have probably the most incentive for sheep. These guys are big, they're stable, and they're, reasonably priced. Oh, shoot. Okay, next page. Data ownership. So this is probably one of the biggest problems with a lot of genetics today is whatever platform or entity submits the data, air quotes, owns it. And you can't get your raw data files back from anyone that I'm aware of today. And so to the extent we're allowed to by the contracts of, whichever vendor we go with, we do want to offer this kind of like, if you go to 23, well, I guess formerly 23andMe, you could download, your own SNP data as a raw format, and then third-party processors can operate on it. That's the objective we would do. Also, that may be partially redacted if there are some of the markers are under a proprietary NDA. That really comes down to which vendor. So I don't have a solid answer there, but our stance is that we want to make the raw data available. Most people individually can't do anything with the raw data, but third-party services could easily, do something useful for them. I've done that myself with, the human SNP tests. This enables both the association and pedigree.dev to do research into both positive traits and diseases for the animals. And it gives you a direct link of the raw genomic data back to the registry. So looking at different types of panels, and I picked the Flock 54 kind of as an example. So it's a 1,000 SNP panel. It'll provide parentage and a select group of SNP markers. So like, your scrapie, like codon 171 or OPP, myostatin, and I think in total theirs is 35 markers. Of those, most don't necessarily apply to Australian whites, right? Like spider lamb syndrome, for example. And then a 50,000 panel will give you everything above, but it also gives you the ability to calculate genetic EBVs, which predict the genetic merit of an animal. You can also do the genome-wide association studies, which is you'll usually see it abbreviated as GWAS. This is the thing that's letting you find new traits, find if there's a genetic cause of diseases, and kind of the industry standard is on these 50,000 SNP panels. These big panels, the probes, that the actual measurements that are taken, they're more or less evenly spaced across the whole genome. So they're not at some exact marker. Usually there are exceptions, right? There'll be specific markers they want to go after. But it's producing a fingerprint of the animal, you're not getting 50,000 results back. And so the analogy I would give is like if you took a 1,000 SNP panel, you would get kind of this little block of dots, right? And without that outline, you'd have no idea this was a lamb. But when you take the 50,000 panel, you can definitely tell that this is a lamb. You can't see every single detail. You can't, see the wool fibers on it, or not wool, but hair fibers on it. But it's a lamb. The eye is right here. And so that's kind of the difference of these types of panels. And kind of how this works, this one's getting a little bit into the weeds, but there's a thing called linkage disequilibrium. And you can't necessarily always get the marker that you're after. Some markers that it's a deletion. So the marker is literally gone. None of the panel chemistries allow to measure deletions directly, but they're in a block. And so everything, from this yellow to this yellow, they travel together. So if this green one changed to the opposite version, all of these with it will go together. So you might measure this yellow guy over here and it'll tell you what the green one is. Kind of in a little flattened piece of DNA, maybe we want to measure what this C is over here. We might need to measure the A. And so these 50K tests, because of the linkage disequilibrium, they can reach out much larger net, if you will. And so as long as you're inside the LD region, which is linkage disequilibrium, you can by proxy find traits and diseases. I give a little thing on parentage calculation here, just maybe for interest. If an animal has a sire that's AA and a dam that's BB, the offspring for a given marker, the offspring must be AB, right? It inherits one copy from both parents. And the way parentage computation works is you count the opposing homozygotes. And so an example would be if this lamb came out AA, that's impossible because it had to inherit a B, right? So that would count as a mark against it. All genomic tests have some value. They're small, usually like 0.1%, but there are errors in the tests. So it'll read an AA as an AB or even more rarely as a BB. It'll read it totally wrong. So you account for a small tolerance band that says, hey, based on the error rates, we expect this many errors to be possible in the tests. The bigger the panel you check animals on, the stronger your statistical evidence that it is correct. And that's something, when we started getting into it, it was interesting is parentage is a statistics game, but you can get to these statistical, 1 in a trillion type odds. And so you're guaranteeing it's the parent pretty much. Cross-platform parentage is definitely technically feasible. So for example, you could cross flock 54 with, say we went with the Eurofins 50K or something like that. On the infrastructure front, so we're working on a product called allele.dev, and it is doing the sample submission, the logistics. One of the observations we've had is from some other groups that have done genomic sample testing or sampling. They were absolutely drowning in managing spreadsheets, between them and the producers, them and the labs, and vice versa. And so our goal is to run on low, or as near zero margins as we can. And so we can't afford labor. So this is all about infrastructure to make sure the costs stay as low as possible. This gives you, automatic parentage reports, your trait reports, and then it can do some breed estimation, although that needs enough samples, right? And in digging in the research, we can detect up to about F2. Anything above F2 is pretty much impossible. the noise within the read itself is bigger than an F3 would show for you. This gives you the long-term storage of the raw data, and it links it back to the registries. It also supplies your genetic matrix data that would work with the EVVs on our management app. And then it's also designed to be sandboxed. So if some other organization was interested in using that infrastructure, they would be able to do that too. Here's an example of what one of our proposed parentage reports would be. And so it tells you everything about the subject that you put in, with some of the results of the call rate, how many it actually read of the targets that it tried to read, how much the genetic inbreeding is. And then this is runs of, oh God, there's homozygosity. It's kind of a different inbreeding measurement. And so you essentially, the only thing most people would care about is the panel status of verified, but you can actually look at the raw data. So we compared, 46,537 loci and had 0 opposing homozygotes. So this is an exact match. So trying to make it a more transparent report, like this is the underlying math of why we're saying it is what it is. And then here's a draft trait report. And so similarly, some of the more interpreted markers like Scrapie and OPP, you'd get kind of the summary up here. So you'd get the ARQ VHR risk class 3, and then the OPP haplotypes. Each individual codon then just gets listed out, so you can actually see what your base data was. Now this particular image is synthetic data, so it's nonsense as far as what the data is in there. Hence, this animal's affected by many, many diseases. The final markers that'll be available on the test, is kind of to be confirmed. We're trying to get all of the offerings from the various wet labs and compare them, right? The goal here is to minimize cost to producers. And so we need to see what each lab is offering at each marker site, and then what we would need to add on as a secondary test. And so an open question I'd have to producers is, what's most important to you? It estimate, it depends on the lab, but at least one of the labs, it's like 25 cents per marker we add to the test. I just give an example is OPP resistance has something like 20-ish markers that you can test for to give you all the possible haplotypes. But if you just go aim for 1-1 animals, you can test one marker, right? And that's this TMM154E35K. This gives you everything to say, is this a 1-1 or not? If we added 2 more, we'd be able to detect haplotype 4, which is kind of it's a deletion, and it allows that animal to effectively act like a 1-1 animal. So we can come back to that maybe afterwards. And then this is kind of a little preview on the breed analysis portion of the allele software. So I think that's it for updates for me. And I wanted to open up for questions and get people's opinions.
I think everybody's still digesting all that. Does anybody have any questions on what John has gone through?
John, remind me, what did you say to take samples for those? It would be the little tag in the ear, or was it a type?
Every one of the wet labs, they all prefer an all-flex TSU. Most of them have a cost premium. It's like between $5 and $8 to do the DNA purification from basically any other sample type. And even, I forgot the other company that makes TSUs, but they seem to really prefer the all-flex TSU. That's the ear punch. And so those, at least when I bought my gun, the gun was like $98. It almost looks very similar to an ear tag gun. I think Sauna maybe got one for like 70. Was it Valley Vet? I don't remember.
I got one for 80 off of Neogen. Neogen was about the cheapest place.
And then you have to buy the little
the TSUs themselves.
Yeah. And they come in
they're
10 or something.
I'm sorry?
They come in Packs of 10.
Yeah. Yeah. An empty TSU is shelf stable. Once you've punched an ear and have material in it, it's shelf stable at room temperature for a year.
Wow.
And so you can collect the sample and just put it on the shelf. I mean, obviously you want to mark what that sample number and which animal it went to. But you can collect samples and then not send them out to the lab for, 9, 11 months, something like that.
I'm just throwing mine in a baggie and putting them in the freezer right now as I'm collecting all these.
Yeah, is it okay to put them in a freezer or a fridge? Or
That
it
is
better?
the long-term storage. Like they'll
Okay.
often sample it and then throw them in the freezer, like after they've done the testing. At a -80 freezer, right, which is 80 Celsius, which is a laboratory grade freezer, DNA will last forever. Now, when they put it at -80, I don't know if it's the raw TSU or if it's purified DNA. I mean, that is the one open question I do have.
Okay, well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, this is Dan Bevins. Now, is this going to be necessary for us to do this genetic testing to register our sheep with the association? Is this a requirement?
Right now, I believe it's encouraged, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, so basically, because actually, I don't even have any lambs on the ground yet, but I'm getting closer. Okay, I'm about 2 months away. So we take the two numbers that we have from the embryo straws. Okay, can you walk me through the basic steps on how to do this?
On the registry or?
Yeah, on the registry, and then that falls into this the genetics or
Slightly different topic.
okay.
How about
Dan,
we table
we
the- I'll-
we
Go
can
ahead.
set up a Zoom, just a private Zoom, and walk through registering them.
Okay, so first we register them, and then later we would do the genetic testing.
She said she'd set up a
one of the things I'm looking at, and we're just trying to get everything finalized. We need a final price. I mean, the target right now is I'm trying to be under $26 for the genetic testing.
Mm-hmm.
What we may end up doing is there's a combined registry fee. So you could buy the genetic test by itself, or you might be able to do like a combined registry plus genetic test together.
Okay.
Right. And maybe there's a discount there if they go together. I don't know. Right. That all needs finalized.
Wait and see.
But today, for animals on the ground, this would be just a totally separate step, right? For basically registered animals. I mean, technically you could do it for any animal.
Okay.
But the big thing is trying to get all of the infrastructure in place. And like I said, I'm trying to put it where the association, the registry, the producers, we all have access to the data we paid for. And trying to make sure that we're picking, like say, a test that lasts the duration, so that we're not, 10, say, not 10, but like say 2 years down the road, if, for example, Zoetis decided they're not interested in sheep because it doesn't meet their bottom line, and we had gone to Neogen, is that a risk that we lost all the testing we did and you have to retest these animals?
Okay.
So there's, just being very cautious to make sure that if you test once, you don't have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
That would make sense. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, I have a question regarding, and probably relates to Dan's question about the embryo lambs. If you took a DNA sample of those lambs after they're born, there'd be no way to verify their parentage at this point. Is that correct?
Directly, no. There is, if you have enough offspring of the same sire, the parentage algorithms can essentially create a stub and they can reach back in time. So they can say, hey, we know these 20 sheep are off the same ram. And so you could technically find like maybe there's an error, like someone was attributed to this ram, but it wasn't. That can be done. And it's like the larger the sample pool, the further back in time you can reach. I mean, if you had thousands of, samples, you could probably reach back maybe 2 or 3 generations on the sires. The dams, you'd be lucky. I mean, maybe because of all the embryos, you might be able to reach back and do that same technique to one generation of the dam. I don't think it could go back 2 generations. It needs a lot of offspring to match them to reach back in time.
So essentially, the DNA testing is more for as we move forward to be able to have that database of the animals in the registry, and then as they have offspring, we would be able to verify the offspring because the parents are already in the database, correct?
Exactly. And I know there's some open discussion at one point is like, do you do that for all animals? Is it just the sires? If you just required sires, you would reduce the errors in pedigrees probably 95%, at 5% of the cost, right? If you force every animal, there's a large cost to that to get that last 5% error reduction out.
So, John, we are about to start lambing and we run multi-sire. And so I need to start doing DNA testing. I guess I put one ram in for 2 cycles, so I'll know those first lambs that are born.
Yeah.
But
But then if there's a cleanup.
yeah, I put in 2 Australian whites, so I'm gonna have to DNA test with it. But is there a one that you prefer for me to go with right now that will integrate with your system? When
So the optimum would be to take the samples,
okay,
pull the TSUs, and then wait till we finalized. Because if it goes through us, we retain the data, which means you have access to the data. If you go to a third party, you'll get the report back, and that's it, right?
okay.
So,
And
John,
there's
maybe
not a there's an international. It's called the international. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the acronym. ISGC, the International Society of Genomics Consortium. I feel like maybe I got something crossed there. They come up with these standards. We'll do these 200 markers on this species. There are some proposals for sheep, but there's not an official standard for sheep. And in cattle, they do have this, and you can become essentially a certified data interpretation center, they call it. And so the various interpretation centers can say, hey, do you have this animal? Hey, do you have this animal? That doesn't exist in sheep. And so today, like if you went to Flock 54, there's not really an official mechanism to even do a cross parentage validation. I'd love, like once we're up and running, I'd love to talk to them about that. That way you can reach across the border and, cross verify both ways, right? Both associations would benefit from that.
so what the goal, I think, of the association for building this DNA bank, rather than just producers sending their stuff to Flock 54 or UC Davis or whatever you do. I have sent stuff to UC Davis in the past, is that we can open the door, or keep the door open rather, for further studies down the road. And that way we can go back to that report, and if something good or bad happens, we can try to go back to that report and figure something out. And it's not just your scrapey OPP or parentage markers. It's the entire report on those animals, and that if we need to, we can go back and look at it because we have, the association or John has that report. And so that's kind of the goal of the association is, yes, parentage verification or sire verification, but it's also broader than that, and trying to look to the future to track some things with the breed. Does that help a little?
Yeah, that's where I would have a bias towards the larger panel. I mean, that brings you the complete fingerprint of the animal. Both for good and bad, you can find more about what's going on. Like Sana just said, I mean, with the smaller panels, you do get parentage and you do get specific markers, but it's a one and done, right? You can't do anything further with it. With the bigger panels, there's just so much more potential capability. It has to be acted on, but you have the potential to do actual genetic enhancement, via selection. But they really do need to be all on the same panel, right? And that's the toughest part, is making sure we pick a panel that's cost effective, and long-term sustainable.
Okay, well, to say the least, this is pretty overwhelming. I think at least for me, it is. But one of the values I can see it is the estimated breeding values. So if I would have something tested, how soon could you get estimated breeding values on a ram, or however that works?
So the way estimated breeding values work is you can do them without DNA. They're just less accurate. You need to collect the data, and I picked birth weight because it's the easiest one, right? You put in your birth weights for the animals, and that's not really the registry's position. The Manage app we have is designed around that. It's both for day-to-day management and also to be the data pipeline to collect all the data for estimated breeding values.
Okay.
And so it's a collective effort, right? So you have a lot of producers that are putting in the production data, the birth weights, the weaning weights. And it doesn't have to be weaning; it's just kind of around 60 days. If you're doing fecal egg counts and all this type of data, the more you put in, the more EBVs you can get back out. And then the system will statistically produce, it teases out the environment. If one, like say you had a ram and it produced 2 offspring, just to keep it simple. One went to a farm that, lived on thistles and rocks, and another one lived on a farm, feedlot. So it's living on corn, right? Well, the corn lamb is going to weigh, let's just say 150 pounds at 120 days. Again, I'm just making up numbers on the fly here. And the thistle and rock lamb might weigh 60 pounds, right? I mean, it's eating thistles. And the way that the solvers work is they say, how is it that these different offspring from the same ram ended up so different? And so it pulls apart the environment and the genetics. And then it says, hey, this ram will give you a +2 to weaning weight or a +2 to birth weight. And that's off the mean, the average for the whole breed. And so you only get EBVs when everyone's cooperating, and they do take time to build. For the Australian whites, we have no data today. So the first round of EBVs that we start producing would be relatively low accuracy. I mean, to me, it tells you something, but I wouldn't make a breeding decision solely on it. It's 10% of my decision, tops. But if you do this over 5-8 years, and now you have this big history of the breed, they start becoming much more accurate. And the more animals you put in, the more the ancestors become accurate. So over time, everything's becoming more accurate. And that's how NSIP works, right? But they work with a dozen breeds, typically only really large breeds. And so a smaller breed that doesn't have a big footprint, like Australian whites, they wouldn't have it. And so we're trying to solve that problem. And we have the EBV solvers are built. The collection side is built. I've not joined them together yet, right? Just kind of as an update to that. So all the pieces are there, and it's just putting together the orchestration to start reporting that data. The management app is very much an alpha. I know John DeCristofaro has been using it, and you've been giving me feedback. If anybody wants to use it, it's manage.pedigree.dev. You're more than welcome to, and I'm very happy for feedback. And that doesn't have to be AAWSBA sheep. You can put in Ramble-A or whatever you want in there, right? It is literally a sheep management application.
And that's available on the club website?
It's a separate website. Let me go find it. Where did I put it? I put it in the chat. Like I say, it is an alpha. There's some rough edges. Right there. I've been using it for my own naming. I could pull that up real quick, I guess. Give me 1 second. Share window. So I store all my own animals in here. It's really designed around the phone. It's certainly usable from desktop, but it's designed around the phone. And so, you basically come in here and say, I'm going to add an animal. You put in all the info. If I had a ewe that was lambing, I just come in here and record and say, hey, she's going to have 2 lambs. It was by natural service. It knows that I've exposed this sire to her. So it was an unassisted birth, ALE 26 or 15, let's say. I picked my tag color. It's a female, 12.1. ALE 2616, tag color 11, right? And then I would record it. If I went and grabbed, another ewe that has it, right? So this one, I've got her progeny from this year or last year. They're in it. So like I say, this is designed around management of the animal themselves, right? And this particular animal, right? So she has like a photosensitivity. So you can put little notes against them. You can put these labels on them, right? This is something I really like, is I can tag them as like, hey, this one's nursing, and it creates these synthetic groups. So I can say, hey, who's got babies on them that are nursing right now?
Mm-hmm.
The group part, if I go back to an animal, this is actually used by the solvers. These are cohorts, and that's animals that are physically together. They're being treated the same. They're together with each other. So my main flock, they get fed the same. They're treated the same. They're on the same pastures. That's what the solver uses to say, hey, these are a cohort of animals. So it picks things apart. And then I say you use labels and things like that for other things. But it holds, all the basic information about the animal, how was it when you weaned it. And it's very opt-in. You don't have to fill out every last piece of data about this animal. I've been starting to build some analysis for it. If I wanted to look at my under 1 year animals that are female, what's their daily gains, right? So this would be the crop from last year. How are they going? Here's the new crop. Are they going to really high daily gains because they were just born? Maybe my 1 to 2 year olds, right? And it's going to look something like this. It gives me my quartiles, and none of this is EBVs, right? This is just direct data out of the management side. But same thing like with labels. Who's my coal list right there, right? So I know everybody that I'm going to coal this year. A little bit of a tangent, but like I say, anyone's more than welcome to use it and provide feedback. I'm very interested in making this a pleasant to use application. We don't have EID support yet, but it's something that certainly I've been kind of poking at a little bit. Technically, if you can put an EID reader into serial mode, it does fill in data for you. if you pulled up this animal and then scanned it with an EID reader connected to your phone via Bluetooth, in serial mode, it acts like a keyboard. The system would shove an EID in for you. Or if you created an animal, it'll do the same thing. But I have not tested that yet, right? Again, this is alpha.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Quick question or just a comment about Concern and Zoetis and Neogen, right?
Yeah.
So they are pretty committed in the space. I'm not super connected with movers and shakers on the Zoetis side anymore, but I just wouldn't. To me, I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, Valbazen has to go away. A number of other products have to go away before they're going to walk away from this data opportunity, and I think that gives them a very competitive.
I don't disagree with you there. I mean, I have a little
Compared to
concern
Merck,
about
right?
the ovine genotyping is like it's in the rounding error as far as revenue for them compared to cattle.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing with them is to get the SNP markers and all of like the markers you care about and the 50K test. It's actually way more expensive than everyone else to date, right? And so cost might be the killer for them.
I that would not surprise me. I mean, when I sold for them, you bet they were not you didn't sell on price, so I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no, like I say, we're trying to make sure to do a thorough comparison each of the major labs, where we want long-term sustainability and low cost for producers, right? And it's balancing those two. But no, I mean they're not out, but I do worry a little bit because Zoetis tends to be more bottom line oriented. But I do agree it's probably unlikely. I mean, I've got a commitment from them that there's nothing changing at least till the end of 27. They've got a long road ahead of them just doing the merger. And so no one's going to know anything until 2028 with Neogen.
And just always know Zoetis is a phenomenal pharma company. That's what they do well.
Yeah.
They aren't the best diagnostic company when it comes to small animal, honestly. They're not. The old technology. So that would be my only reservation with Zoetis. But they generally don't buy stuff and then flip it. So I hear you,
Right.
but I just thought I'd share a comment. Thanks.
No, I definitely appreciate it. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
So, John, if I keep these TSU samples in my freezer for my percentage animals, to try to find out the sires, do you have a nice little timeline of when you think you'd have things ready, or any rough estimate?
My hope is summer. I mean, if I had my say in it, it would have been January of last year. The all of these companies, it's like I say, I was trying to go in the front door talking to them, and that was very difficult. We've been making a lot more progress since the geneticist has been helping. Right, he's able to just reach directly to the people that make decisions. Eurofins is progressing well. Weatherbees were in the beginning. Neogen is just slow, and a lot of that I think is the merger that's going on. And so, like I say, my best guess at the moment is summer. Like I'm hoping sooner than later, right? Like early June, but maybe May. It's hard to say for sure. Well, I think that was all I had. And like I said, people were more than welcome. I mean, you should email to info@pedigree.dev if you got questions, comments afterwards. Again, we want to make sure we're doing the right and the best thing for the producers. I am interested in what people would like to know about markers. Right now I'm leaning towards the must-haves being the the 4 scrapey markers, OPP, E35K, maybe the other two, myostatin, and then the 2 fecundity genes, Berula and GDF9. My opinion, for Australian whites, these are probably the only must-haves. Again, a lot of the markers out there, they just don't apply to the breed because they're in other breeds. But if someone has a strong feeling one way or the other, feel free to chip in, and just send your opinion on it. We will, with the labs, as we're moving along, we'll have to make a decision pretty soon as to what are the must-have SNPs that we'll be supplementing the main test with.
John, this goes back to the certificates for like registered animals, but will
Mhm.
those certificates have those photos on them, or they'll just be on the registry? The photos will be on the registry site.
So today it's only on the registry, but for one of the associations I've been onboarding, they put really nice fancy borders, and they wanted their photos in the certificates. So all of the infrastructure for the certificates is in place to have them basically completely overhauled. And it's just, I'm a programmer, not an artist. And so if anybody, is more of an artist, I am more than happy to update the certificates and make them look, less utilitarian. And photos, like I say, that they're there, they're able to be printed into the certificates if that's desired.
Very cool. I was going to ask too, I haven't been on the site for a little while, but I remember our last meeting that you talked about like the updates that you have done. Can somebody go on and see my animal if I give them access or give public access? Can they go on and see my registered Australian whites under my
So
farm name?
they can see, yeah, if we go, let me share screen again here, window.
I just thought that would be interesting if they could see the pictures of those animals. If I wanted them to, maybe the
Yeah,
rams that I have on my farm that I'm using, give them access to see those. Not like
yeah,
they
there
don't see them on Facebook and stuff.
100% of sheep, trust me. So if I log out and go back to that page, this page is publicly accessible. And if there was multiple photos in there, you could carousel through them. So you can see the breed, the pedigree, progeny. It doesn't let you see, like, obviously they can't get a certificate and they can't see any edits and things like that. But it is designed as an open stud book, and so you can go see the public data.
But I have to go or say this is your profile or your farm. You have to go into your pedigree.dev account and make that accessible. Is that correct? Like for
No,
people to
no,
see?
no, no.
Oh, that
It's
is.
open stud book. Open
Oh,
stud book.
okay. Okay.
And so it's the registration ID, right? So it'd be awsba.pedigree.dev/animals, and then their registration number. That is their unique URL. And so anyone can see that. I've been in talks with some associations that are interested in having closed stud books or restricted, where you can look at like 25 a month. So we'll probably add that capability. But today everything is open stud book. It does have a anti-scraping in there, right? If someone tried to programmatically come after it, it'll ban them. But any normal person that's just looking at things, it's not going to, bother them. All right. Well, thank you
John,
guys.
that sounded quite complete. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate giving the update. I mean, I know the genetics has been slow. Like I say, a lot of that's the wet labs. But as I've said before, is we just want to make sure we're making the right decision, and not just diving headfirst. I pass it back to you, David.
All right. Well, thanks again, John. Does anybody else have any, this is an open question and answer session. So if anybody has any questions on anything that's happening or has any suggestions on future subjects, why we certainly would like to hear that. So anything that's on your mind, speak now. We've been on here for about an hour, but we'll be happy to stay a little longer if you have something you'd like to go over.
Hey, David, could I ask a question?
You certainly can.
So I'm trying to respectfully kind of understand what's the path forward with the genetics.
In what regard? I mean, as far as bringing in genetics or?
Well, so Graham had asked intellectual property be removed from the association.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to understand, how does that affect me as a member? And I'm not throwing gasoline on this. I'm just trying to understand, is the leadership looking at promoting other genetics other than Tadakil, or help me understand what the conversations, if that's possible, you guys have had, and how you were kind of structuring things moving forward.
I'm glad you asked that question because I think a lot of people are kind of confused on that. Graham became a little, my understanding is Graham became a little disenchanted because we were reporting actual results on mostly embryos. And he was also a little disenchanted because he thought for some reason we were hoarding or not selling his embryos. And that was certainly not the case. It was a situation where we were told that there were no embryos available for sale, by RSG, which was storing them. So when people would call and ask for embryos, and calling our association, which were handling them at the time, we would relay that there were no embryos available. And then somebody would buy embryos the following week or 2 weeks. And then Graham would be getting calls that we were not selling embryos or hoarding them somehow. We didn't know that there were any available because we were told they weren't available. So he felt that that was an association problem. The next step was when people would ask the logical outcome, the success rate, we would tell them exactly what people had told us that they received. And that basically ranges from 0 to 100% success. Overall, it's probably, as lambs on the ground, it's probably closer to 40% from everything. So he felt that that was a negative on his embryos. So he felt we weren't pushing the breed as much as he wanted it pushed. We felt we were pushing quality over quantity. So at this point in time, Graham says he's not going to endorse any particular organization and he wants to handle the genetic sales himself. He's going to ship them to my understanding from Graham is he's shipping them to RSG, and anybody that wishes to purchase them can purchase them directly from Graham and pay Graham, and then Graham will release them to the purchaser, which is good news to us because that was a tremendous liability. We were kind of the middleman on that. So if something went wrong, you're probably not going to go to Australia. You're going to go to the local representative, which was us. Plus, it took an awful lot of time. Um, and we were a small organization and we really didn't want to spend all that extra time. So we're very happy with the way that went. So right now, we can purchase embryos the way we always have from Graham. We also opened it up. If anybody wants to purchase genetics, semen or embryos from any of the other breeders of Australian white and register in our association, as long as they can be um, tracked back to original Tatty Teal genetics, we have no problem with that. So we feel we've opened it up a little bit more for people that may not want to purchase directly from Graham. Initially, the only problem we saw was the way we were doing it. You could purchase any number, as long as you purchase the whole straw. So you could actually buy 3 or 6 or 9 or 10 or whatever number you want, as long as it came out right in the straws. Initially, Graham didn't want to sell small numbers. He didn't want to be messing around with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10. So he may have changed his mind since then, because embryo sales have become a major factor for him, I believe. So kind of condensing this all down, Graham wants to be more independent himself. We like to be more independent, but we can still purchase the genetics just as we've have in the past, and any members can purchase directly from Graham, and as long as they were available in the United States, just pay Graham and then arrange to either pick up or have implanted or whatever. They become your embryos at RSG. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just was curious if this was causing a hard shift away from Tatakeel. And I would just say I would hope that's not the case. And the reason is he's just done millions of dollars worth of research, and the breed is so young that there's going to be things that come up, and guaranteed, comparing this young breed to others, you see things because the data sets are so small. So 1 in 100 is a really big deal compared to 1 in 10,000, right? So,
Yep.
And so I think it's context, and I think I would say I'm a young member, but I'm very impressed with what he's done, and the patents he has, and the sheer partnership he has with scientists all over the world is a testament. And so I just think, if I decided, crazy thought, of flushing my own animals, I don't think that on my scale I could do as good a service as Graham has.
Mhm.
So that's my thought, and I'm going to continue with his genetics just because that's who brought us.
Mhm.
But I appreciate you answering the question. Thank you.
Yeah, and basically keeping in mind that all Australian white genetics go back to Tattykill. I mean, originally there were 3 or 4 producers that kind of all got together to create that Australian white breed, but Graham was the driving force in it. So everything out there that is Australian white does go back to Tattykill. Being able to use other sources, which are basically breeding from the same lines that Graham has developed, is just an option that people have. So, and again, as Graham freely admits himself, that they all go back to his bloodlines. They're just people are going, expanding on what he's doing. Looking at what he has done, and what you just mentioned, Graham, at the very least, has saved 15 years of anybody trying to develop a breed like this. I mean, it's quite amazing the extent that he has gone to and the money that he has spent to get where he's at. And that's what first attracted me to the breed. I had tried to do something like that, but not anywhere near his level. And I quickly realized after being introduced to the breed that I could spend 15 more years trying to accomplish it and still not get to the point he was at, or even close to it. So yes, he does deserve an awful lot of credit. And I don't think anybody would dispute that.
Well, and to add to that, Sue, the bylaw was changed, what, David, last summer. Doug Edge wrote the new bylaw opening the import up. Doug was the one who proposed it to the board, and we agreed to open the registry up to other studs. And he actually wrote the bylaw for that amendment to the bylaws to have other studs in our association.
Any other questions? This is getting interesting.
Well, what other studs are there?
There, in Australia, there's at least 4 or 5 major breeders. You know, there's syndicates that have gotten together, like one group that purchased that, $250,000 ram and used them quite extensively and developed their own lines of patty teal sheep. So there's Graham, of course, and then there's 4 or 5, and we're talking people that are, have 5, 10, 20,000 sheep that are embrace the Australian white and are running their own breeding programs with Graham's genetics. So there are other sources of Australian white over there. Just like there's, sources of Dorsets and every other breed, but it is getting quite well established, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anything else? Well, we're kind of running on. I really do enjoy these question and answer sessions. It's a way for people to bring everything out on the open and get a good understanding of what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years. So we do encourage that. And we do also encourage any suggestions you care to make on subjects you'd like to hear about. We do want to be an information center, and we want to be able to consolidate things so everybody can benefit from it. We're all here because we really like the sheep. Whether you like one aspect of the breed or another, basically the lambs on the ground are kind of the convincing factor. So if anybody else has anything to say, speak up now. Otherwise, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Please watch the website and the Facebook page and for new developments. And please do send in any suggestions or comments or subjects you'd like to hear about. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody again, and we'll hope to hear from you again soon. Good night, folks.
Night.
You just